My name is Rick Bragg. I write books, uh, mostly about people of the foothills of the Appalachians. We've done about 12. We've had about 8 bestsellers, which I'm not sure speaks to the good taste of the people that are buying them, but I appreciate it. I think it's a really simple idea that we kind of stole their stories. I don't mean that we copied them, but I cannot tell you how many people have walked up to me in line at a book signing and stabbed the book with their finger and said, "You stole my story. That was my mother. That was my father." I think the idea of hardship, the idea of writing about it in a, I hate to use the word visceral. That's one of them $40 words, but writing about it in a very realistic way instead of just writing in cliches. Hard times are hard times. But if you have babies perishing because they can't get to a doctor during the Great Depression, that's different from hard times. That's evil killing times. So I think that people recognize that specific nature in the books, and they cleave. And they also just, how do you not love a book about somebody's mama? Why are Southerners such good storytellers? And there's all kind of theories. Some people say it's the heat. It's the heat. We can't do much except sit around. And those are people usually that have never been on the end of a shovel handle. So I don't buy that. I I think it's just the amount of suffering, the loss. Uh, we fought on this soil two great upheavals. First, the Civil War, and then the Civil Rights Movement. And there are people who will say that my people were on the wrong side of both of them. And but that turmoil and that suffering and that here's another one of those $40 words, that pathos lends itself to good storytelling. Part of it may be just that the way we sound, the rhythms, and the way we talk, the beauty in the and there is a beauty in the way Southerners talk. There is just something about that translates to Thomas Wolfe. It translates to Faulkner. I'm not a huge Faulkner fan, but it translates to Faulkner. It translates to, Eudora Welty, and it translates, of course, to Harper Lee. You read the first paragraph of Harper Lee, and you know that this is a Southerner. Possum Trot is one of the little neighborhoods right next to where I grew up. And when I think it was the Yankee editor that I was from Possum Trot, they just loved that. They just went wild. But I grew up in rural Calhoun County, and the closest probably place to get like a McDonald's hamburger would be Jacksonville, Alabama. And it's not, we were way out in the country, so we weren't really close to anything out there. But northeastern part of the state, up about halfway between here and Birmingham. I wanted to be a baseball pitcher for the Atlanta Braves, but I was, I sucked. Uh, and I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to design and draw great structures, bridges, and skyscrapers. But I couldn't do the math. Then I wanted to fly a jet plane and couldn't do the math. And everything else I wanted to do, I couldn't do the math. But my people could talk. They could tell stories, beautiful, violent, bloody stories about living and dying in the foothills of the Appalachians. And I thought, I can do that. Making the transition from the oral storytelling to writing, for newspapers and magazines and then books. Really, it wasn't that much different. You still have to lay the foundation for the story, and then I tell people that you paint a picture and you hang it on the air. And I think if you can do that, then you can have a writing life, a storytelling life. I knew that I couldn't do a book for fun. I knew a lot of people that did books that did not have to be a commercial success. Mine had to be, because I didn't have, generational money behind me. So my books had to be a commercial success. So moved to New York and got a little attention, and an editor gave me a call one day and said, I don't know who you are or where you're from, but if you want to write a book, maybe we can do that. And the best book I had was My Mama's Struggle. So that's we kind of plucked that out of the air. And about 2.5 years later, I held it in my hand. It's just one of the best feelings in the world. But there were reasons for it. I think you probably have that feeling no matter what you're writing about. If you're writing about humor, if you're writing about war, or you're writing about, Middle Eastern politics, you probably still have that feeling that you have accomplished something here. But to write about your mama and to hold that in your hands and have her looking back up at you, that's a different feeling, I think. So I was very proud of it. She was utterly unimpressed at first. She had no idea the import of having a book published by the best publishing house in the world, and knowing the reach of that I would be on a book tour one day in Scotland. That she just didn't really understand it. After 9/11, I wrote about the worst things that people can do to each other. So the cruelty that you write about, around the country and around the world, it's the same cruelty that you have, with a drunken father who hurts his people. It's the same thing. It's just maybe severity and the reach of it is bigger. But the things that I learned there certainly applied in writing about my people. And there's not really any difference in the way you go about it. But you begin with a story. You begin with color, imagery, and detail. You begin with a story inside the bigger story, something that sums up or pulls you in, the oldest trick in the book in journalism. And then you paint a little picture there that is emblematic of the rest of the chapter. And then you just keep doing it. You just keep doing it. And for some reason, it's worked. I love to talk about writing, and I love to think about writing. I never get tired of thinking about it, because it's the only thing I really am any good at. Ava's Man remains, his story remains my favorite book for the writing of it. But he was famous in Calhoun County for what he did. He made whiskey, but he wasn't the kind of whiskey maker who made it by the truckload. Although he did do time twice, including once in the federal pen in Atlanta, right up the road here. But what he mostly did was raise children, survive the Depression, make liquor, and roof houses. And I think there is a kind of heroism in that. So what you do is instead of talking in cliches, you break it down to specifics. What did he do specifically to keep his children safe and his wife out of the loony bin? Because my grandma Ava was always about a half bubble off plum. How do you do that? And sometimes you do it violently. Sometimes you do it by shooting a woman with a 410 shotgun who's trying to cut his head off with a hog killing knife. Sometimes you do go to prison because your children are hungry. How do you make quick money? Make some liquor. So I think there was heroism in it. I do think that young folks who are enamored with a story told on a device this big, in 30 seconds of screen time, I can't even clear my throat in 30 seconds, then I do think we are at great peril. What I fear is happening is it's becoming very, very specialized. That, wealthier kids, have access to some of this material and this discipline. If they want to read the collected works of Dickens, they can go get them. But you probably ain't going to read them at poolside on your laptop or on your tablet or whatever it's called. I fear that it's going to become like someday will become not as relevant to working class people like my people. I fear that it will become a thing of privilege, and then that'll just be the worst thing in the world. It just terrifies me that good reading and good writing will become once again the thing of a kind of a upper class. One of my heroes is Galileo, because he insisted on writing in Italian instead of Latin, so that the people on the ground could get at it and understand it. And I think they put him under house arrest. I think the church put him under house arrest for that. But his findings, his theories, he wanted them to be accessible to a common man, for lack of a better phrase. And he was persecuted for that. I fear that we're seeing a slow turn, and it ain't even a slow turn anymore, back to a time when that kind of reading for joy is becoming more of a thing for rich folks. And I'm probably being melodramatic. As I am wont to do. There ain't no better way to illustrate a point than to exaggerate it slightly. But I'm trying not to do that in my old age. That said, nothing makes me happier than to crawl in a taxi cab in New York City and seeing the taxi driver have to unfold his newspaper before he can, get going. Nothing makes me happier than seeing a thumbed over paperback book on the seat of a car in a parking lot in Calhoun County, Alabama. Nothing makes me happier than that. But, to read, you do have to have time. And it seems like time is harder and harder for us to cobble together.